I'm there.
Sure.
Of course I'm going to go. And within a few hours of my arrival at the sheriff's department in Lumberton, North Carolina, the switchboard started acting up, and people were calling in, and they were seeing something in the sky. And so into a sheriff's car I went with one of the deputies, and by maintaining contact with the other law enforcement people in the area in their cars using their car radios, we all finally drove into an area right in front of a big field. The sun had gone down, there was no moon in the sky, stars were coming out, and the only sound that we could hear in the area in front of this big field were animals that were apparently nervous about something going on. So we all got out of the cars, and as we looked across the field in front of us, there was a line of trees, and as we watched, there was a red light and an alternating white light, just going back and forth, red and white, very slowly moving above the tops of the trees. And then when it got to about midway along the trees, it stopped, and then it started moving across the field toward where we were standing. That's when I started to get a little nervous. Kind of a combination of nervous and excited. And this thing got closer and closer until it finally just stopped directly in the air above us. And it was at that point, because of the way the lights on the object were reflecting off of it, we could see that it was a triangle-shaped object. It had a row of white lights up one side of it, a row of red lights up the other side, and at the apex of where the two sides met was a larger, brighter light. And the thing, Rob, just stood, it parked itself right in the sky above us. It made no sound, and it was just right there. We estimated that it wasn't much bigger than one of the cars that we had arrived in. Not a very big craft, but it sure got our attention. And as we watched it, as it was just hovering there, at the apex light, all of a sudden it got brighter, and a beam of light came right out of the object and shined directly down onto the ground where we were standing. So you can imagine, how my heart was pumping at this point, because a lot of thoughts were going through my head, such as, well, I feel pretty safe because I'm surrounded by police officers and their little six-shooters. Well, wait a minute. How safe really am I here?
Yeah.
Because if this thing wants to eat us, well, I'm an appetizer. I'm done. So this bright light was shining down on us. Couldn't have lasted more than 3 or 4 seconds. It was really bright. You could hardly look directly at it. And then the light went back up into the craft. And as we watched it, the craft turned like an amber color. The whole thing was an amber color. And it very, very slowly turned about 90 degrees and just started slowly moving away from us, as if to say, I'm done with you people. I'm going elsewhere. And so everybody collected their wits. We got back into the cars and followed it as much as we could through a couple of counties there in near Lumberton, and we kept coming onto scenes where there were other law enforcement people there who had just had their own encounter. And so my purposes of being down there to gather information and interviews for Dr. Hynek was perfect, because I had my tape recorder, I was interviewing these people, came upon Police Chief Gary Moore was his name. He was sitting in his patrol car, and he said he saw something weird, and I said, what did you see? He was sitting in his car, and all of a sudden the whole inside of his car lit up. And just like Richard Dreyfuss in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, when his truck is stopped at the railroad tracks, and he looks out the side of the window and looks up. Well, the police chief stuck his head out of the window of the car and looked up, and he said this thing was just parked in the sky above me. So I said, all right, what did you do? He very slowly got out of his car, went over to his trunk, opened up the trunk, and he pulled out one of those big old police lanterns, gigantic flashlights that they often use in emergencies.
Right.
He shined it up, he aimed it at the object in the sky, and he blinked it once. And he said, the thing blinked back at him. I went, really? And then what did you do? He said, well, I blinked it twice. And it blinked twice back at me. And then it turned and it went away. It was done with the police chief. Then we found two other police officers a few miles away who said that while they were outside of their car, listening to the chatter on the car radios, they saw this thing coming above them in the sky, and instead of stopping directly above them, without missing a beat, the thing just did a quick 90-degree angle turn and went off in another direction without stopping. So, needless to say, Rob, Dr. Hynek published my story. It became known as the Lumberton UFO Report of 1975, and I got to see, something that was really unusual. I got in touch with the local Air Force base there in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Of course, they weren't going to admit if they had anything that they were testing in the area. And again, in 1975, while we can assume nowadays that things were being researched and developed at Area 51 in Nevada,
right?
Did we have anything that could perform these kinds of maneuvers? And I was told afterwards, I was told recently by my new acquaintance in the field, David Marlar, who's written a book about triangular UFOs. David said that the encounter that I was involved with was one of the first multiple witness UFO encounters of a triangular ship, and this was several years before the famous Phoenix Lights took place in 1997.
Truly
so,
fascinating.
yeah, the long answer to your question, yeah, I've had an encounter, and you never forget it when it happens.
We'll be back on the other side of this news break. Please stand by, Lee. Lee Speigel is my special guest this hour, Exonation. UFOs is the topic. If you'd like to visit Lee's website, www.leespeigel.com. And Lee and I will be back on the other side of this commercial break as we continue from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Once again, to Stanton T. Friedman, get well soon. Our thoughts and our prayers are with you and your family. Hey, pal, I'll give you a little bit of an insight. I've had 3 heart attacks. They're not that bad. They can all be better. We'll be back on the other side. Take care. Are you considering calling a psychic to read your situation? Then consider David Champion, a psychic medium for more than 20 years with thousands of readings under his belt. David Champion will make you feel comfortable. He has proven to be honest and accurate. He's a straight shooter. There's no guesswork. What he sees is what you get. While he is a medium, most of the calls focus on relationships, not only love, but work, school, neighbors, and more. Need help with finding a job and preparing for the interview? Are you dealing with people who are obstacles in your path? For more information, go to davidchampion.com, $1.50 per minute paid by credit card with a minimum of 30 minutes. For your reading with David Champion, call 1-877-702-8598. That's 1-877-702-8598. Now you can dial in to listen to the X-Zone Radio Show from anywhere in the world with Rob McConnell 24/7, 365 by dialing 213-401-0080. That's 213-401-0080. If you have a mobile phone or landline, the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell is now at your beck and call at 213-401-0080. That's 213-401-0080, 24/7, 365. Now you can dial in to listen to the X Zone Radio Show from anywhere in the world with Rob McConnell 24/7, 365 by dialing 213-401-0080. That's 213-401-0080. If you have a mobile phone or landline, the X Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell is now at your beck and call at 213-401-0080. That's 213-401-0080, 24/7, 365. Welcome back, everyone. Lee Speigel is our special guest this hour. We're talking about UFOs, and Lee's website is www.leespiegel.com. Lee, you are the only person to have ever given a talk or presentation on UFOs at the United Nations. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, I would love to talk about that. After I finished producing my UFO documentary album in 1975, I still wasn't satisfied. I wanted to do something else. I wanted to do something more that would help bring a credible awareness of UFOs to the public. And I thought, well, you know, what better way of doing that? Because it's not an American or a Canadian phenomenon. It's a global thing. And I thought, well, okay, we have this thing here in New York called the United Nations. And I started asking around and found that no one had ever really done anything about UFOs at the UN. And also was told by many people, you can't just walk up to the United Nations, knock on the door, and say, "Hi, can I do a presentation on UFOs, please?" You know, it's like, well, you're done. Go away. Go back and live in your parents' basement. We don't want you here. So, as it turned out, in 1977, the prime minister of the little Caribbean country called Grenada started making some waves at the UN. He started giving speeches in the General Assembly asking for the member nations to think about putting together a committee that would share UFO information among each other, and mostly because he claimed that he had his own experiences, and that there were many UFO encounters in the country of Grenada. And as a matter of basically protocol, the UN very patiently and diplomatically listened to Prime Minister Eric Gary's ranting, if you will, of UFOs. And I was noticing this, and I also noticed that nobody was paying attention to him. And I thought, well, maybe I could offer him something. Maybe we could help each other in some way. So I became friendly with his ambassadors at the Grenada mission at the United Nations. And I went to visit them, and I brought with me a copy of my UFO album, UFOs, The Credibility Factor, and I gave it to the ambassadors and said, would you please give this album to your prime minister with my compliments, and tell him that I would like to meet him sometime, because I have an idea that I think could work to your advantage and also to my own. And as it turned out, not long after that, I was invited to the United Nations on the night when Eric Gary was knighted, became Sir Eric Gary, in a whole big deal, extravaganza, ceremony, pomp and circumstance, and lots of great food.
Well, there you go. You can't beat that.
Well, yeah, there's a reason for going.
Sure.
And it was after he became Sir Eric Gary that he and I were brought into a room where we had a one-on-one meeting, and he thanked me for the album that I had given him, and he said he understood that I had an idea or a proposal. I said, yes, Mr. Prime Minister, I've been watching you, listening to you on the news, and with all due respect, the world is really not listening to your proposal, because there's a lot of ridicule factor around the world about UFOs.